Good afternoon. My name's Claire Turnbull, designated nurse for safeguarding children and adults for the Integrated Care Board for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And this afternoon, I'm going to share with you an overview of the launch of the pre-birth and post-birth planning procedure for the Safeguarding Matters Live. This Born into Care series is dated, as you can see, 2018 to 2022. And the session that we're doing is about trauma in the context of parenting. And these documents will help you understand the context of removal at birth and what this looks like and the impact and how we can practice and support parents. This insightful quote from Judge Nicholas Crichton talks about the family justice system. So if that system's removing the fourth, fifth or sixth child from families without doing anything about the reasons for removal, it's a failing system. That for mothers and fathers, the younger the age of the child at removal, the greater likelihood there is of recurrent proceedings. So all of that happening again, a bit like the judge is saying about taking child after child after child. So if we're looking at a failing system, and we look at the next slide, this is actually showing to us about the age of children in care proceedings. And that's dated, as you can see, 2007 to 8, and between that year and 2016-17. A further 36% are issued at birth, which equates to a third of those children. And there's been a significant increase over the last 10 years in relation to issuing care proceedings within 7 days of birth, and it's doubled in this time. 47% of these babies' mums appeared within previous care proceedings. And the new research published last year says newborns are accounting for 50% of care proceedings. So we're talking about a high percentage of children taken into care and a high percentage of very young babies, and obviously the impact. The next slide is showing the findings here, and there are regional differences in the rate of the increase of proceedings. Short notice hearings have increased in England and Wales, and there's high levels of mental health needs. The impact of trauma can manifest itself in a range of ways. The kinds of things that you might see working with parents are substance misuse, domestic abuse, mental ill health. And if we only focus on the visible problems, the underlying trauma goes unrecognised, and therefore it's not addressed. Not understanding the role trauma plays can lead parents to struggling with their parenting in a way they never anticipated or never intended. So, you know, most parents want the best for their children. And as you can see from the findings, the reduction in preventative services, there's a higher threshold in order to get services, and the resource constraints affect the legal proceedings. Recruitment issues, delays in identifying need and offering services, fathers feeling marginalised or maybe invisible fathers, which we'll talk about later, and members of the family not included, and multiple experiences of trauma that I've just talked about. And there's also the position on the ward. We'll talk about all those areas as time goes on. So the timings of proceedings and the impact on bonding between those parents and the child, and the limited choices and impact of returning home without the baby. It's 1 in 4 mothers, so that's 25%, is at risk of reappearing in care proceedings following an initial set of proceedings, and that's within 7 years. And the experience of repeat proceedings is the greatest in a short period of time, in the first 3 years. And an interesting area of the prevalence is that 1 in 8 fathers in England is at risk of appearing in subsequent care proceedings within 5 years. So it isn't just the mothers, it's the fathers as well. And 50% of the babies subject to care proceedings within 2 weeks of birth are the children of mothers who've had previous children subject to proceedings within the last 5 years. The other thing to note is there are marked regional differences in the rates of reoccurrence, so it can be very different in different parts of the country. Many parents have experienced significant and multiple adverse experiences in their own childhoods. Used to be called ACEs, they're still called ACEs in some areas, and they're likely themselves to have been in the care system as well as children. Complex and unresolved trauma, and the sort of phrases that are used about parents, hard to engage, And so this can lead to a misdiagnosis of emotionally unstable personality disorder, but actually what those parents are presenting with is multiple and complex trauma. So it's a traumatic event in itself, as I imagine that everybody would understand, particularly removal at birth or shortly afterwards when somebody's just had a baby and is in a very vulnerable position at that time. It exacerbates all sorts of parents' problems. So what can happen, and in interviews that we've had with parents locally as well, the parents can lose benefits that they weren't expecting to, and housing, and tend to be suspicious of services and be of suspicion to services because of what's happened to them, being judged by what's happened to them. And evidence of complex grief, which I think is shown quite well in this cartoon to our right here. And the status of parenthood, they're still parents, and potentially ability to parent again. And the contact with the children living elsewhere is also important, and important to that baby if they've got siblings or half siblings as well. So subsequent proceedings when somebody's already lost a child is likely to be much, the child's likely to be much younger and completed much more quickly. So it's as if you're judged already on what's happened before, and the gap between those repeat proceedings often is very short. And children in second and subsequent proceedings are more likely to be adopted than children in index proceedings. So there's a sort of escalation, if you like, and adoption is more likely than other orders to lead to further sets of proceedings, and then problems with pre-birth assessments. So there's a lot to consider there with the impact of removal. The pre-birth audit that took place in 2023 to influence the procedure development. So a group of babies were identified for review, and that was based on cases where both parents or one parent had had previous children removed from their care. And there were 12 cases that were looked at, different organisations that were involved. So 3 local authorities, the district council, UHL from the point of view of maternity, the National Probation Service, where there were cases where families were involved with probation. There was living without abuse, where domestic abuse was a significant factor, and the Integrated Care Board, the GP records, and Leicestershire Partnership Trust, and also Turning Point, where substance misuse services were used as well. So there were positive examples of work, but there was room for improvement, and that was from all services really that we looked at. And many of the room for improvement linked to recommendations from the Change Project. So, for example, better engagement of families and dads and the support networks for families, better working with parents with a learning disability or a learning difficulty, better communication between services. And the Audit and Assurance Group are monitoring the recommendations from the audit, and uptake of multi-agency procedures was one of these, and also using things like the neglect toolkit and the domestic abuse toolkit. So that's a summary of the pre-birth audit. What I also wanted to cover now is our local reviews and the cases that have happened in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So the local reviews that influenced the development of the procedures. There were 4 cases across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland where 5 babies died between 2020 and 2022. And obviously that was over the COVID-19 period and lockdowns, etc. as well. And of those cases, there was some patterns of lifestyle and behaviour that were recurrent. So these women were homeless or had a recurrent housing issue or temporary housing. They had issues of substance and alcohol misuse, and some had been involved in sex work and used sex work to support their drug and alcohol misuse habits. And in all those cases, there were rapid reviews undertaken, and in one case, a local child safeguarding practice review, and still that is not published. And then we also had a baby that died in 2021. A mum was known to have had learning difficulties, and a rapid review was undertaken in that case. And then between 2017 and 2021, there were 2 babies who died one in 2017, one in 2021, and there was neglect seen in both of those cases. So all the learning from those local reviews have been used to improve our procedures. And obviously, as well as the national work, it's useful for people to know about the local work. This is all the procedures in one place around the issue, and there have been chapters that either have been enhanced or added in the light of what we've been talking about and what we've been learned nationally and locally. So the risks have been increased, the risk area, and there are new chapters, and one of them is chapter 3, working with fathers and partners and responses to trauma in the pre-birth period, and then chapters 10 and 11, planning for the birth and post-birth planning, and considering what can and what should be done if there's a separation at birth. So the first thing we're going to do is consider the working with fathers. So as you can see on the next slide, working with fathers and partners, and we're not trying to exclude partners who are not fathers, or partners who are not birth fathers, or female partners, but there is quite a lot of evidence in the research that was done in 2021, the myth of invisible men, to say that often men are invisible and we don't know enough about them, and they can present a risk to some fathers can present a risk to children. So there was research done in safeguarding children under the age of 1 year from non-accidental injury, and what has been developed alongside the procedures is a LLR practice guidance, and it's called Practice Principles Engaging Fathers and Male Carers in Effective Practice. And as you can see, there's the link there, but we also link the procedures into the working with fathers and partners. Separation at birth, that's also a significant chapter in terms of practice. So it's helping parents and significant others in their support, hopefully their support around them, kinship support or friends and family support, thinking about bonding and the timing of separation if that's what's going to happen, and giving them some power and giving them some control about how they would like this to happen. And how long they'll have with their baby, how they want that to happen. Do they want to walk out with their baby and put their baby in a car seat, or do they want someone to come and take the baby? That those situations happen in a private room, in a side room, so they're not people observing them when they're going to be very distressed. And also how to create memories and have a think about they were a parent and what they want to take from that and want to take with them, maybe some pictures, etc. And where carers have been identified, is it possible for the parents to meet the carers before separation if it could be helpful, and the aftercare of the mother? So the baby goes, and then of course you know the midwifery care is offered, but sometimes mothers don't want to be reminded of that. But obviously they won't have a health visitor anymore. So a lot of the people that were involved with the mother before she has the baby just disappear. Then they don't have a social worker, everything's attached to that baby that's now left her. So is there somebody there to offer support? Imagine going home to maybe cots and buggies and things that you might have got ready for your baby, and then you've got no baby when you come home. And the link to postnatal care, and to inform the GP that separation is the plan. So when to refer, these are some additional things to be considered. So where there's been a previous unexplained death of a child while in the care of either parent, partner or significant other. So we have had cases where maybe the partner has had previous children, but we don't know the details about those babies, and being professionally curious about things like that. When the degree of domestic violence is known to have occurred and is likely to significantly impact on the baby's safety or development. So that would be any unborn baby under 12 months, they're particularly vulnerable to violence, or practitioners who become aware of any incident of domestic violence in a family where there is a child under 12 months of age. So that would be, or in families where the woman is pregnant and they know there's domestic abuse, that is an automatic referral to children's social care. And where a current pregnancy has been concealed or denied by the birth mother, or where that has happened in the past. And then the other slide, as I said, there are two slides here. Again, a pre-birth referral should be considered where there are concerns that the baby may be suffering or likely to suffer significant harm. including a parent or partner previously suspected of fabricated or induced illness in a child that was previously called Munchausen's by proxy, or a prospective parent or partner has been subject to FII, as it's now called, as a child themselves. So the referrer should be able to identify the risk to the unborn child due to the impact of FII on the parent or partner. So we're not saying a referral would definitely be made, it's about considering a referral in those circumstances. And concerns that the parent or the partners are rejecting medical advice or treatment which might place the unborn baby at risk of significant harm. Or a pregnant person who is prevented from accessing or fails to engage or actively avoid services that support them and the pregnancy of the unborn child. So when I talked to you about the previous cases locally of the ladies that were sex workers and had fluctuating home circumstances, they did fail to engage, but also in some cases had partners who were preventing them from accessing, or their lifestyle was preventing them from easily accessing services. There is an unborn child with a child protection plan, so the mother will be highlighted and then the baby will be on a CP plan when they are born. These are important points to note. Once the unborn or born child is on a child protection plan, the safeguarding unit in the local authority should add the Child Protection Information Sharing Alert, CPIS alert, onto the mother's before she has the baby, or the newborn baby record. And what happens when this alert has been put on is that safeguarding alerts go to the social worker should mothers present in an unscheduled health setting. So that's not every health setting, it's an unscheduled health setting. And that's why I have bullet pointed all those different areas. So that's like if they turned up an emergency department, and that should be the same if it was over the border, a walk-in centre, minor injuries, the ambulance service, GP out of hours services, and the 111 line, and also direct access to paediatric wards. And if GPs and health visitors have been invited to previous safeguarding meetings, they should link the birth notification to the safeguarding concerns. So that means if women go to other services to avoid suspicion, the CPIS should kick in, and that's why I've explained it in more detail. And it's an issue in the audit as well, just to say in the audit that was undertaken that GPs hadn't been invited to case conferences in time, or not given time to give a response. So it's having all of that information available to you in that pre-birth period, including the history. And unborn babies subject to a child protection plan. A pre-birth professional safety planning meeting for the hospital admission should take place no later than 36 weeks of pregnancy, and if possible take place by 32 weeks or as soon as possible if it's a late referral, and obviously we do get late referrals, and if labour is imminent prior to the estimated date of delivery. So the other thing to consider is women who've got certain substance misuse problems might deliver earlier because of the impact of their substance misuse, things like cocaine. And the separation at birth also comes into this chapter. And this is talking about the Phoenix team and the advice from Turning Point. And it's also holding a meeting in the best way for agencies and family members to be able to take part and to be coordinated virtually if that's a good solution for that. So the next slide is talking about post-birth planning, and the planning is for the baby to be safely discharged from the hospital, considering current and new and emerging risks and identified safety. And the meeting should also include agreeing the plan post-discharge. So this is not just the date of discharge, but where the baby will live, who the carer is going to be, and significant other carers for the baby. It talks about the roles and responsibilities of the family network, what support they can give, any restrictions on contact, and the roles and responsibilities of the different professionals that are involved, including when they visit in the initial period after birth and the date of the next core group, and when the parent will be able to see the baby, where separation is the plan, so the venue and how that will be arranged, transport, etc. where the baby or the parents or significant others will see their baby post-discharge, and what information would the parents like to share. So that may be how the baby likes to be held, what the baby likes to wear, or what the mum likes the baby to wear, or the dad, and feeding regimes, that sort of thing. Some families, the families that will always benefit from a safe discharge planning meeting, and that will include where the baby is subject to a legal application, where there are specific concerns that have emerged since birth. So that could be observations by the staff on the ward and documented in the parenting log. So, you know, some information about maybe how the parents haven't interacted with the baby or haven't followed instructions or have been absent, etc. Where the baby is showing signs of withdrawal of substances and monitoring post-discharge. So again, additional information and resources have been added into the procedure to talk about different drugs and how the baby might present and at what time, because sometimes that withdrawal isn't immediately after the baby's been born, but some days after. So there may be a need for more support for the carers about how to look after that baby, or there may be a request for delay in discharging because the baby's got signs of withdrawal from the drugs. And where parents require specific support with their parenting from either the family or safety network, which requires multi-agency planning. So that might be monitoring of the parents, it might be who would take a priority there. And where there are professional disagreements about the discharge plan, there's a clear escalation process that should be identified to ensure it's resolved prior to discharge. And if this cannot be resolved by discussion between appropriate line managers, to use the formal LLR escalation policy, and the baby remain in hospital until a resolution is possible. So the Change project actually also developed best practice guidance, and it is quite long and it is quite complex, but it's helpfully structured into 3 sections or periods of time, and those are pre-birth, so that's from conception to labour. And then there's where the practice is focused on the maternity setting and up to the first court hearing. And then the final section is leaving hospital and returning home. And so there are various statements around the organisational structure, the processes, and also practitioner practice in those 3 separate periods of time. If we just look at the procedures, those are all the different bits of the procedures. There's the pre-birth and post-birth planning and procedures online. There's the pre-birth pathway. There's the disagreements, the information sharing, children and families that move across boundaries. Obviously, for babies that are born in Rutland, they can often be born in another area, say across the border in Lincolnshire or Nottingham, for example. Then there's the non-accidental injury, and the practice guidance and principles of working with fathers like we talked about earlier. And then other resources also include videos from research and practice. So if you wanted to know more about the Change project, you can have a look at those and the background. SUDI information, safe sleep resources, the ICON website. And then in particular, this is a useful document, risk of harm to children in your household. So that's giving guidance to parents about how to keep drugs and alcohol and other substances safe and away from children, and risk of harm, which is quite useful. And then the whole research and practice talking about parents who are disengaging and reconceptualizing non-engagement in terms of a trauma-informed approach. Thank you very much for your time.